my colleagues and friends. It gives me immense pleasure to be here. I'm grateful to the York University and to my own government for giving me this opportunity. Coming to this particular campus, I came here, I think, 15 years ago to attend a conference. And when this opportunity came, I lapped it up because that time I had spent only 3 nights somewhere around and had a very vague memory of the Valley Hall, which I believe to me appears like a micro-universe. So much happening there. Truly multicultural campus. I feel blessed. A Commonwealth University sharing similar ideals. So we have so much in common, and I'm sure that with the help of ICCR and your own, there should be a two-way traffic, and the universities in India as well as in Canada, including York, would benefit in the years to come. We have so much in common, not only the language, but a lot more. Democracy, multiculturalism, many other things which we can think in. And one of the things which brings us closer nowadays is this term called knowledge. It has picked up, so these days everybody talks about knowledge society, knowledge economy. When the new century started, my whole media in India, there was so much of hype. Everybody was talking of knowledge society, knowledge economy, set me thinking, what does it actually really mean? I went back as a student of history to 20th century when my forefather entered 20th century, 1900, 1901. How did they feel? When we entered 19th century, how did our forefathers feel? That was difficult to find because those reports were not that explicit. But 20th century, definitely, there was this spirit of self-reliance, Swadeshi people talked about. We had, it was the apogee of the Raj, high noon of the empire, 1900. So, and a lot more was happening at that time. But still, the hype was not there. It was a very sober welcome we gave to 20th century. And people didn't use the term knowledge very much at that time. The term in vogue was education. Knowledge was considered part of philosophy, tradition, inheritance, and so forth. When I use this prefix "new," we got it from our forefathers didn't use the term "new" when they talked of the knowledge which came as part of the colonial package. They used the term Western or European knowledge. When we use this term Western or European, you associate it with a geo-cultural region. That has a very specific connotation. When the Chinese, when they use the term new, this was very smart. Because when you use something in terms of new and old, you don't associate it with certain cultural baggages or geo-cultural specifications. You can handle it, deal with it, at your own terms. There were, of course, difficulties there also. When Japan opened up, they had their own difficulties. A lot was lost in translation and so forth. But in India, we use the term Western. Much later, the term modern came. But this insistence on the term Western or European had certain advantages and certain disadvantages. Anyway, before I get into this politics of knowledge in terms of new, old, etc., and how does it affect our today's concept of knowledge society and knowledge economy, let me go back a little to distant past and would very quickly recount that India has never been a xenophobic society. Knowledge, people always put premium on it. One of the Sanskrit terms used to describe India, Bharat, Bha in Sanskrit means knowledge. It has that connotation. So knowledge has always been part of South Asian existence. Of course, there were certain limitations, but there were many areas in which they had made a very fundamental contribution to the corpus. For example, in terms of astronomy, in terms of mathematics, in terms of medicine, linguistics, Panini's grammar, many more, So there are numerous examples and people have talked about it, written about it, large amount of literature exists. But there were certain limitations also. The limitation of caste, for example. Psychologists have worked here in India, in your campus. Most of my students, when I asked them to write a term paper, they wrote on caste. And I was not surprised, but for many, India looks like as if it is only caste which matters. But it has been definitely one of the limitations on our knowledge activities, on both the dissemination of knowledge as well as generation of knowledge. Caste did affect, there is no doubt, because what it did was it caused a disjunction between mind and the hand. People who work with fingers, like artisans, blacksmiths, carpenters, were pushed to the margins of the village, while the sanctum sanctotum, the people who organized and controlled the village or the city or the temple, they remained engrossed in what you may call contemplative knowledge. But this had been a strength as well as weakness, an enormous weakness, because this disjunction between mind and fingers meant a disjunction between scientific ideas and its technological translation. The problem continues even now. Our engineers, they go to the shop floor. Even mechanical engineers turn up as executive in Deutsche Bank or Bank of Montreal. So, and they all go to, I'm in a business school, I'm talking in a business school, yes, it's lovely. So, that is one of the contradictions of our own time. And my caste system had definitely reinforced in different ways. So that was a huge limitation, and that was one of the reasons why Indian society, despite its vibrance, despite all the potentialities and opportunities, gradually declined. And in 18th century, colonization became almost inevitable. Till 15th century, we were a perfect match to what was happening in 14th century, perfect match to what was happening in Western Europe. Even under the East India Company, we were enjoying the favorable balance of trade. In turn for spices, we were getting bullions. But there was something which had brought us down. What it was? My friend right now exulted over Taj Mahal. I love Taj Mahal. There is no doubt you all know India associated with Taj Mahal. Our society, since we have plenty of sun, we want to keep the sun out. Therefore, our society built huge stone architectures. 10th century, you have Bradeshwara temple in Bangalore. South India is so full of, in 11th century, you have in Puri, huge temple architectures, where sun is kept out. The sanctum sanctotum has to be dark, lit with one lamp. The deity has to be, cool, pour water, keep it cool. When the Muslims came, they brought slightly little more than the stone. They brought tiles, which was man-made, which has certain ingenuity, technological ingenuity. And of course marble, which we all know is not only beautiful but has a cooling potential. So we had a Taj Mahal. But unfortunately, we never allowed ourselves to think in terms of glass. We knew glass. Glass beads have been found in archaeological evidence more than 1,500 years ago. For 1,000 years ago, we had been making glass bangles. Unfortunately, we couldn't go beyond bangles. Our women love these glass bangles. We couldn't go beyond. We couldn't turn glass into a microscope or a telescope. We couldn't produce a Leeuwen hoop. The same period when we were making Taj Mahal, there were people who were grinding glass. And glass, as you know, is optics. it is physics. It dealt with light. For us, we were not even aware of it. Guardian glass was not there. We were happy applying. Okay, I don't know its English translation, but in Persian and Urdu we call it surma. You would put a lotion in the eyes to strengthen the eyesight. But we never used glass. Glass was first offered to Jahangir's court and as a curio. This was a loss in terms of knowledge of optics and physics. It is not that optics was not known in Indo-Islamic society. It was. Ibn Sina had worked on, Ibn Haytham had worked on optics as early as 12th century. But we couldn't move beyond. Another loss was, today as we all know, is the century of 21st century. We call it a century of biology and biotechnology and so on. All this emerges out of the knowledge of fermentation, science of fermentation, the new knowledge of fermentation. My society, unfortunately, we didn't grow grapes. Mediterranean culture had the grapes, so wine was not there. Nowadays we have started exporting it into France, but we didn't have the wine culture. We had cannabis. We believed in freshly ground stuff and consume it, and we had our own ways to enjoy trance. In the Vedas, the term soma appears, but soma is what kind of plant is not known. But of course, it was an intoxicant. However, unfortunately, the knowledge of fermentation, alchemy, gradually had gone down. We knew, Nur Jahan knew how to make perfumes. It was called Nur Jahan ka Bhakka. Earlier also, we had the tantric and the alchemical cults. If you go look into the religion of Tantra and so forth, the whole knowledge of Tantra, you will find lesser. But all those knowledges have become, by 18th century, little obscure. A society, both in Arab and in the Middle East as well as in South Asia, in China, they needed something more than that. Because we couldn't provide that, gradually we fell one by one. It is not that only the Mughals fell. It is the same century you find the Manchus, the Ottomans, the Safavids in Iran, all great Asiatic empires falling one by one and being replaced by, look what? Portugal, the Dutch, the Danes, and of course the British. I mean, how did it happen? It happened not because of one Clive or one Curjil or another Kitchener or someone, mounting, or a Columbus or a Vasco. It happened because a certain kind of knowledge had developed with which other societies couldn't keep pace with. The result was enslavement. When this enslavement took place, the people quickly recognized the difference between the two. And in 18th century itself, you will find evidence of cultural encounter coming up. This cultural encounter was played not only in terms of social intercourse, but also in terms of play of ideas. The European travelers who visited South Asia, they wrote about South Asian knowledge, they wrote about South Asian society, their women, their customs, etc. in their own way, while our people who visited Europe had their own observations. As early as early 18th century, late 18th century, we had Abu Talib, we had Isamuddin, we had many more who visited different parts of Europe and commented upon it. They also looked into the power of steel, worked on it, how to make the maximum out of the advantage out of the new knowledge, etc. Then, if we come to early 19th century, then certain questions came up quickly to one's mind. They are, for example, well, I've already dealt with how did the Indians speak when they entered the 20th century, 19th century, difficult to find out. How did they look at the techno-scientific knowledge? How different it was going to be from the past? When I use the term new knowledge, what I mean essentially is the techno-scientific knowledge.
what was the vision of New India, which most of our forefathers, especially in late 19th, early 20th century had. Could they succeed in making a blueprint, etc.? It was not that easy. It must have been very difficult, but they definitely tried to deal with the situation. Early 19th century, you have a middle class emerging, which looked at the new knowledge with great admiration. Therefore, during the period 1800 to 1840, you will have in Calcutta, which emerges like a second city of the empire, much bigger, I'm sure. I don't know what Toronto was at that time, but in Calcutta, during that period, you have numerous societies, academic societies being established. Agriculture, Horticulture Society, Calcutta Medical and Physical Society, Asiatic Society, of course, had already come, Calcutta Botanic Garden, numerous. More than 200 journals were being published from Calcutta, out of which at least 30 to 40 were of scientific nature. All this was unique. Today, in 21st century, look at Calcutta. There are not that many journals. If you contrast early 19th century and early 21st century, you will see Calcutta now has 15 million population. But it doesn't sustain a very vigorous academic or knowledge-oriented society. If I compare these two quarters of the century, first quarter of 21st, first quarter of the 19th, then you see a huge difference, remarkable difference. And Indians emerged as collaborators. It's not that the Indians were there only as recipients of new knowledge. They came up they argued. They wanted to be a party to the dissemination. At that time, generation of knowledge was not that easy, not possible, because for generation, they always looked to the metropole. So you have Paris, London, then you have Edinburgh, and so forth. But for dissemination also, they wanted a share. Generation in certain areas, of course, also took place in the colonies, in Australia, in Canada, in India, for example, in geological sciences, botanical sciences, and many other areas. You will see that colonies did impart knowledge to the metropole. When it is the metropole which learned from the colonies. Colonies were in that sense a huge laboratories of knowledge, where things were gleaned, took, and then assaying and analysis would be done in the metropole and publications would come. But the colonial knowledge workers played a very significant role. And these knowledge workers were not only from the military, they were from the civilian also, the civil servants, military, traders, all types, travelers, all types of people who contributed to it. In mid-19th century and late 19th century, Indian share goes up, the local share. The South Asian share goes up in that knowledge dissemination processes. More and more Indians became aware of the power of new knowledge, which they wanted to assimilate and talk about and take advantage of, and so forth. So, you have new people during this period, late 19th century, like Ramadhan Bose, Ramanjit Trivedi, many others, at least several dozen names one can give, who try to articulate new knowledge in terms of Indian tradition and Indian requirement. This is very significant. These are the people, they were taught people in a sense that they wanted to have the best of both the worlds. They didn't want to lose what they had inherited as part of the Indian tradition, Indian knowledge tradition. There was lots which they deferred. They wanted to refine it also. They wanted to sieve it also. They wanted to. So knowledge, even the new knowledge, was not consumed neat. It underwent a certain amount of change, configuration. I won't say distortion, configuration, reconfiguration. During this period, these are the people who played a role in that. I mean, one can go in great detail, and these are the people who, and there were many others who talked in terms of culture. During this period, you have Rabindranath Tagore, late 19th century, the laureate who brought forth, who put forward, the traditions of Sankhya, the traditions of Upanishads, the traditions of Vedanta at the forefront, and juxtapose it to for example, the European philosophy of positivism, or many other discussions which were those days being held. So not only in terms of science, but in terms of philosophy, in terms of many other cultural areas, Indians were trying to articulate their position. It was not an easy job, very difficult. It's difficult even now. We are yet to decide, which part, where do we really belong. I will go back, I will go further, when I touch, the one man who didn't suffer this dichotomy, because during this period, you will have this Indians torn into two, because they just didn't know what to accept, what to reject, what to assimilate, what not to assimilate. One person who took a very clear stand on these issues was none other than Gandhi himself in 1907. When he wrote his Hind Swaraj, he asked the Indians as early as 1907 to decide whether they want to be the 6th or 7th edition of America or Europe or not. He was very clear about it. He wanted to go back. He was very clear about it. He wanted little village republic. He wanted decentralization. His economics, as you know, Gandhian blueprint, Gandhian, he was not opposed to technology and science, no. But he knew that if the West would probably be disastrous for India. Well, I don't know whether, because, the gin was out of the bottle, and so difficult to put the gin back, the gin of industrialization, gin of new knowledge, new technologies, new ways of looking at, thinking. Gandhi wanted to put it back into the bottle. Many of his own associates didn't agree with him. His own heir, Pandit Nehru, became the Prime Minister. This comes as part of the development discourse. Development is a term which comes to be used only during this period, 20th century, not in 19th. 19th century people are using the term improvement, moral and material improvement. It was pretty British. But in 20th century, the new term comes development. And that is how this new term knowledge also comes. 19th century, you have improvement and education. Education as a means to improve. But in 20th century, you have development versus knowledge. There is a politics of knowledge, there is a politics of development. And in this contradicting or contested terrain, you have Gandhi standing almost alone with very fixed ideas. People dismissed him as Luddite. There were very few, probably Mumford, Ruskin, two others supported him, but his blueprint was not acceptable to his own people, to the Indian National Congress itself, of which he was the leader. There was a great scientist called Meghnad Saha. He is known as the father of modern astrophysics. In 1934, he brought out a journal called Science and Culture. In the very first issue of Science and Culture, he wrote that modern India cannot be built on loincloth and a spinning wheel and bullock cart. So Gandhi had to be, and in 1945 there was an exchange of letter between Nehru and Gandhi, whereby Nehru says, Babu, I agree with all, we have enormous respect for you, but we can't push forward with your economic agenda. We have to embrace modernity as it exists. We have to take what he called, the term which he used was scientific temper. along scientific lines. What this scientific temper was? This scientific temper was to form the kernel of knowledge and development discourse. My apologies, I do talk about, I read a good deal about science and technology, but I'm not tech savvy. It's very difficult for me to, I seldom run this. I say that I have neither power nor point. So to run this PowerPoint it causes me more distraction in my thought process than it helps me. And I do not have beautiful pictures also to supplement and entertain. So people like Nehru, Meghna Saha, others, they felt we have only the option, either we industrialize or we perish. We chose industrialization. And the British also, especially in the wake of the two world wars, they realized that because they had used India more as an agricultural commodity, India was not that useful in war effort. India could have been more useful had there had been some sort of industrialization, even controlled industrialization, controlled technology transfer, controlled transfer of scientific ideas, technological or innovation ideas had been there. But it was getting too late. Both the wars had broken the back of the empire. And they knew that the days were over, they were counting, and therefore what they did was that instead of doing something substantial, they appointed many committees and commissions. And we have actually, independent India has learned this art from the British masters, and we have rather excelled in it. For everything we appoint a committee and a commission. So the British in the early 20th century, you have Royal Agriculture Commission, you have Public Health Commission, you have Industrial Commission, you have Post-War Reconstruction Commission, you have Education Commission, you have Famine Commission, you have commissions and committees galore. And all these commissions and committees where their recommendations were taken only to be shelved. No question of implementation. We still do not believe in implementation. We have numerous commissions and committees. I don't know whether Canada has this one or not. We have a very unique commission which has just recently submitted it was called Knowledge Commission. Do you have a Knowledge Commission here? No. We are the only knowledge-oriented society in the world which has a Knowledge Commission. And it has a huge report, why India should need 2,000 universities and what kind of knowledge is to be done. Some of my friends are members of that commission, and God bless the commission and them. I can only say this, but there are numerous commissions established during this period. And there are two areas. As a student of history also, I have been fascinated. Though I have published more on science and technology, but I have been fascinated on, for a tropical climate, two areas are very crucial. One, agriculture, the other, health. These two alone will ensure greater happiness, if not prosperity. Happiness to the ordinary people. Food. People, by international relations experts, talk of international security. I don't understand what people mean by security. For me, food security is the real security. Tomorrow, if there is one monsoon failure, or there is one agricultural lapse, there will be food riots. We had food riots in Indonesia 10 years ago, when there was this financial disturbance, the currency going up and down and so forth. Food riots. Agriculture would be extremely crucial. And what kind of knowledge goes into the making of agriculture? Agriculture is also knowledge. Agriculture is not mere practice. It's knowledge. Knowledge which is inherited, as well as knowledge which is generated in laboratories, institutions, and how to transfer it. Green Revolution and so forth came and went, but we are post-Green Revolution, we have other problems there also. And second would be health, public health. We all know that the diseases, epidemics know no borders. In 19th century also there were enormous concerns about cholera, etc., plague, and nowadays these concerns have been replaced by others. Now in both these areas, crucial areas, we need a knowledge intervention. How it would go? State support, private public partnership, how it will be done, are matters to be discussed, being discussed in many forums, etc. But we need to. One of the interesting questions which I came across while dealing with 19th century India was how public was public health. We continue to work on alternatives. Gandhi provided one alternative, but didn't succeed. Now we have neo-Gandhians who talk in terms of Gandhian blueprint for development, but they are in minority. Today we have very heated debates and discussions on biotechnology, BT cotton, BT brinjal, and all sorts of new biotechnology products, etc. So the question of alternatives are very close to us, and these can be solved only in terms of, it is not that in 19th century my forefathers didn't discuss that, they did. The thing is that we need to learn from them, so that the arguments could be sharpened in favor or opposition of the other argument, and we can arrive at a consensus to plan for the future. This is where 19th century and early 20th century debates on development become very crucial. I would like to draw the attention of especially the scholars who want to look into the debates, for example, in Legislative Assembly. We have forgotten those debates which took place, say, for example, in 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, on what the future of South Asia would be. The debates which took place on different other world forums on the future of developing countries, future of societies which would be decolonized, what would be their shape after decolonization. All these debates took place during 1930s, 40s and 50s in relation to Africa, in relation to Asia. Those debates are relevant. We need to go back to them and see what were those areas which we didn't implement. There are many reports of late 19th century which are even till today very relevant. I give you only one example. As early as 1892, there was a Welker report on agriculture. A Royal Agricultural Chemist visited India. His name was Augustus Welker. He gave a huge report on Indian agriculture, 1892. If you read it today, you will see that many of the things which he wrote are relevant for today's 21st century Indian agriculture. And they have not been implemented. Why should a colonial government implement? They were not there for philanthropy. No. Well, they wouldn't implement it. But what independent India had been doing? Why do we continue to ignore them? And instead we start organizing or establishing our own committees and commissions all the time. We did talk about Nehru, of course he was fascinated, because he had a deposit in science from Cambridge. So he always felt himself more comfortable dealing with science and academia than politics. In fact, he used to say later, in 1950s, he was very unhappy with his own political colleagues. In 1954, Nehru visited Beijing, and there he met J.D. Bernal, the great scientist who wrote social function science. J.D. Bernal asked Nehru, what are you doing? Are you left or right, or left of the center or center? Where your policies stand? What is happening in India? Where do you want to take the country? Nehru said, look, half of my cabinet, and this is what Bernal wrote in his diary, which is there in Cambridge University Bernal collection. Nehru said, look, half of my ministers are scoundrels, and I have to keep them in good humor. I have no option but to continue with the politics of compromise. This compromise is reflected everywhere: mixed economy, non-alignment, all the legislations, anything you look up, say of post-independent India, you will see the politics of compromise reflecting at every stage. Nehru was aware of it. But if Nehru, as in his heyday, at that time he was so powerful, a democratic dictator he was, if he couldn't succeed, how could his successors succeed? The successors today, they talk about, the very glib talks, etc. But the truth remains that despite all the talk about Indian economy surging ahead, etc., the truth remains that India stands deeply divided. 80% of India in deep poverty. I would like to end by talking about, again, going back to this colonial knowledge illness. In 19th century, 18th century, the highest value-added product was sugar. Sugar commanded that had the highest value. And probably the country with highest per capita income was not England, it was Haiti, because of the sugar plantation. And as Nada said, people were brought to West Indies, to the Caribbean, to Pacific, many islands, to grow sugar cane. Plantation economy. My forefathers knew how to grow sugar cane. They were bodily lifted from their villages and brought to distant lands to grow, to use that knowledge. That was also knowledge, grow sugar cane. Today, my children, they have wonderful degrees from my IITs and great institutions of technical knowledge. They know how to grow a new commodity called software. Software has now replaced sugar. This is the new commodity. This is what knowledge is, and that's why you call it a knowledge society or India as a knowledge power, because we are good at software. And the beauty of this knowledge is that indentured labor, he's a laborer. His forefather was a laborer, he is also a laborer. Techno-coolie with a very high difference. The only difference is you don't have to approve him, you don't have to bring him to Toronto. Living there, he functions for you in Bangalore. So your phone calls, he attends, and he does it for a dime, which would otherwise cost you $1. How cheap? Very good. Is it knowledge? Is this what we call knowledge economy? I'm grateful for the opportunity. I think I've taken my time. A lot more could have been said, but I'm very grateful for your patient hearing and the opportunity for talking to your students here, taking classes, about almost 50 classes I took, enjoyed it thoroughly. I wish great my regards to you, great hope from your students, and I would love someday to welcome some of you back home in India with my Easter greetings, and thank you very much.